Hey, it's Mike Cambright with FlipNerd.com. Welcome back for another exciting VIP interview where I interview successful real estate investing experts and entrepreneurs in our industry to help you learn and grow. Today, I'm joined by Dave Pelligrinelli, and Dave has spent over 20 years in private investigations and title search and has been featured in many prominent publications such as the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, New York Times, and of course now the best of all, FlipNerd.com. He's also on the board of the National Association of Land Title Examiners and Abstractors. So Dave knows all about title and the importance of title. It's actually not a topic that we've really talked much about on the show before, yet it's an expense that real estate investors pay all the time without ever putting much thought into it other than it's something I've got to do. So today we're going to talk about title research and title policies and all that is, title work to make sure that you have clear title on your policies or you understand what you're getting into. And so before we get started though, let's take a moment to recognize our featured sponsors. RealtyMogul.com is an online marketplace for real estate investing, connecting borrowers and capital from accredited and institutional investors. Get a rehab loan fast and close in as little as 10 days. Rates start as low as 9%. We'd also like to thank National Real Estate Insurance Group, the nation's leading provider of insurance to the residential real estate investor market. From individual properties to large-scale investors, National Real Estate Insurance Group is ready to serve you. Please note, the views and opinions expressed by the individuals in this program do not necessarily reflect those of FlipNerd.com or any of its partners, advertisers, or affiliates. Please consult professionals before making any investment or tax decisions, as real estate investing can be risky. Hey, Dave, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here. Now I feel like I've made it. I'm on FlipNerd.
That is right, my friend. That is right. We're anointing you.
That's right.
No, I'm so glad you're here. And as we were talking about before we started, it's one of those topics that a lot of real estate investors just see as a kind of a necessary evil, if you will. You want to have clear title, but there's so much that goes into it. And I know that sometimes my title company will say, here are copies of the title research and stuff like that, and I almost never look at it because I just tell me, I don't have a decoder ring, just tell me in a minute if there's anything in here I need to worry about or is it clear. And so I know that's something you live in every day, so I'm excited to kind of share that knowledge with real estate investors. In fact, I'm going to learn a lot today myself, I'm sure.
Yeah, that perspective is really common the way you described it. The investor clients and other clients we talk to, that's exactly the way they look at it. They just want to know a simple answer, is it clear or not, and what the status is.
Yeah, and in the event that something comes back, am I covered? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So before we kind of dive into talking about title research and what a title policy is and really just kind of some of the fundamentals for folks out there, tell us your background. And I know you started off as a real estate investor, but kind of how you made your way into this space.
Yeah, a very long time ago, I was actually a commercial real estate broker. Did commercial deals, and then from there, did some investing for about a decade. Did a bunch of deals, usually in the single-family residence area, mostly purchased through direct from seller. A few MLS deals when things were really hot. You could buy deals through a realtor and still have some daylight in the deal. Yeah. Did that for a period of time. It was very enjoyable. It's a great business enterprise model. And then this company started in the mid 90s, and from there, that's what I focused on.
Okay. And talk about kind of how you made your way from being an investor into doing title research. It seems like a non-typical path.
Yeah, the investing actually was not really intended. I had moved to Florida, and I had bought this house just to live in. I started looking around and seeing, okay, there's something going on in the market, and there's a way to turn it into an enterprise. So I realized that if I bought one and then sold that and bought another one, you're never going to really be more than buying and selling at the same level, the entry level. So I bought a few at a time, and mostly were minor fix-ups and flips. Really didn't keep any for any extended period of time. Had some excellent upsides. Had one property that was almost a double, and in like 8 or 9 months. This was a hot period of time. It was like 99 to 2007.
Yeah.
So it was a really hot period of time in Florida.
Right.
It wasn't really intentional. Didn't look to go into it. It just I saw the market and got into it. So.
Okay. But talk specifically about like how you got into title research. Like how did you find your way there?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting story. The company started as an advertising and marketing company. Think like Mad Men, right, where it's traditional advertising, print, media, electronic. And one of the areas we did quite a bit of work in was direct mail, where we were sending mail pieces out to hundreds of thousands of potential customers for our clients and for our own use. And one of the things we did was we do a lot of really deep data analysis. We call it moneyballing, where we're looking at information, looking at records. And we found that if we tracked demographics with real estate records, we could narrow down who we were mailing to. If we found people who recently bought a house, had a certain loan-to-value mortgage, the house was at least this much money, but not too much money, it matched the demographics of our client. Let's say it was an auto retailer. We could match up the car buying demographics with home ownership.
Right.
So we started researching all this real estate records to use for that purpose. We had all this excess records, so I started putting ads in some legal publications, excess real estate records. Well, we got a ton of inquiries, people asking, well, can I get a title search? For a few months, we said no, but after you get so many people wanting to buy something, I'm going to figure out how to sell it.
Yeah.
So we started selling title searches, and come to find out at the time, there wasn't a direct path where somebody could buy a title search by itself without going through the whole closing process with an escrow company.
Right.
And it was a market that wasn't served. So that's how we got into it, and that has dramatically eclipsed all of our marketing and advertising type work.
Yeah, that's great.
And it led us into investigations, but that's kind of the interesting story, how it goes from marketing to title research.
It's fun. All small businesses stories are, there's a lot of very interesting stories of how somebody got to where they are, and it's like that's not where they thought they would be, but they kind of wound up there, and it was just one way or another. They through a series of trials and tribulations, they ended up an expert in something that wasn't their original intention. So, but that's great. So
that same story you had I think a guest on a while back. His name was Justin Williams, I think. He had the same thing, a story where he started one way and ended up totally convoluted different thing into something he really loves to do.
Yeah. Justin's a good guy. So tell us a little bit about the difference between. So what most people do, what I do is when I buy a house, I just go to my title. In our contract it says who's going to pay for the title policy, but I've never gotten just a title search. And I see I want to talk about why people would get just a title search. But always my title policy, my title company gets a title. They obviously do a title search in the process of getting the title policy, which is effectively is insurance, and that's where they make money at. In what instances would somebody want to get just a title search and have no intentions of actually buying the insurance behind it?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's two scenarios where an investor might want to purchase a title search as a standalone product. One is when it's a distressed sale, like a foreclosure auction or tax auction, where getting a title policy in advance of that transaction isn't possible.
Right.
Usually the turnaround time is too short. A title policy usually takes 2 or 3 or 4 weeks for underwriting. You might only have 2 or 3 or 4 days before an auction. And you want to do some due diligence to make sure that that property is unencumbered, or at least you know what the liens are, so you can account for that and factor it into your purchase.
Right.
The second scenario is a buyer who is going to go through that normal closing escrow process, but in advance of that wants to use the title search and what we call title forensics as intel in order to how to set up that deal, or maybe how to approach the seller, or maybe even how to do what we call an entry strategy, right? We all have an exit strategy on that property, what we're going to do, wholesale it, resell it, or retail it, flip it, maybe even keep it for inventory or for rental. But an entry strategy might be affected by what the history of that property is, and sometimes paralleling it with other properties. That title research can help put that deal together to begin with.
Okay. And I don't personally buy houses at auction, but I know people that do. And that's a pretty common scenario, is that you want to know if there's a clear title, aside from the reason it's at the foreclosure. But because I do know people that have bought a house, and then it turns out that the title's not clear, and they have a mess on their hands.
Well, worse than that, I remember one of the stories that sticks out. It was probably in the mid-2000s. I had a phone call, and I happened to catch the call from the inquiry. Guy wanted to buy a title search. Great. Where's the address? Put it in. We started the process. And come to find out, he told me a story. I just bought this property at auction. It's a great deal. Happened to be in Southern California. I paid $290,000. This property's worth $1 million. It's like 1.1 million, appraised value. Okay, sounds good. So we got the search started, and I started doing some research. Sure enough, the tax assessed value was like 1.2 million, and he said he paid $290 for it. And I called him back, and he had bought the auction that day. Unfortunately, he had to give certified funds that day for the auction for the property. Well, guess what? The title didn't have any other liens on it, but what he bought was a second mortgage.
Okay.
Right? The second mortgage is what was being auctioned off at that foreclosure sale. There was a first mortgage in front of it for $790,000.
Yeah.
So if you add them together, it was $1 million. Maybe there was a little daylight in the deal, but he would have had to go through that whole process of rehabbing the property, selling it, commissions, everything else, and maybe squeaking out and getting his money back.
Yeah. So he found out through having you do a title search that existed, and then, but hadn't provided the certified funds yet. So I assume he had kind of a back door.
He did. No, he did. He had already paid the certified
okay.
funds. So I don't know what his exit strategy was. He could either walk away from almost $300,000 or go through the whole process of getting the house sold and maybe getting back 150 or 200 of that money, which is probably what the better thing to do. But who knows? I mean, sometimes the assessed value doesn't really match up with, what you're going to sell it for.
Right. So there's a lot of obvious things that a title search finds. Whether there's any liens against the property, mowing liens, could be mortgages against the property. Talk about some of the other things that aren't so kind of common that real estate investors need to be worried about that could show up. The types of things, and maybe break it up into things that can generally get cleared, and then some things that just totally encumber the property and it's probably never going to get clear title.
Well, it's a good question. Title search and the title abstract, which is the official document of a title search, that is one of the tools that a title insurer, the underwriter or the agent, will use to put together that policy. And if you look on a title policy, the first 1 or 2 pages is what's called exceptions from coverage. That's stuff that they don't cover.
Right.
And those will be things that will be found on a title search. If there's a lien, it doesn't mean the insurance covers that lien. It means that prior to writing the policy, they're telling you this lien is not covered. Anything that is found in the search is excluded from coverage.
Okay.
And additionally, on a title search, you're going to find things like maybe an easement. Well, that's not necessarily a cloud or an encumbrance, but it does affect the use of the buyer.
Right.
If there's a driveway that goes across your property, you might not be able to use that space.
Right.
Maybe things like mineral rights. Maybe at some point in prior history, the surface rights where the house is or the property or the structures are have been separated from the mineral rights, oil and gas rights, surface other types of coal rights. And there may be allowable access for an oil company to get onto that property to do those things. So those are the things that a title search will show. In addition, it's going to evidence things that may not be in the land records, but also might affect title. Did a prior owner ever acquire a judgment against them personally? Right? So let's say if I'm walking my dog down the street and it bites somebody, they sue me in small claims court, win a $3,000 judgment. That's not technically a lien on my property, but by statute, it attaches to any property I own if that judgment is filed in the civil court records, not even in the land records.
Okay.
So that's an area where it could affect a property. We do all the searches and expert witness testimony for the U.S. Department of Justice, federal government. We come in 5 or 6 times a year where somebody had bought a property, and a lot of these properties have title insurance on them. And some owner, 3 or 4 owners ago, in the chain of title, had a tax lien against them from the Department of Justice. They didn't pay their IRS taxes. IRS slaps a judgment on them. A lot of searches, if they're not done to standards, will miss that because it's not really a lien on the property.
Right.
IRS doesn't care. They come against that new owner. The new owner says, hey, wait a minute. I'm not John Smith. I paid all my taxes. It doesn't matter. Bob Jones from 20 years ago didn't pay his taxes. It's on that property. It's on you now.
Wow.
And a lot of times they'll hire an attorney, try to defend against it, and the IRS hires us to come in as an expert witness to say this is a valid lien, and it is, and they have to pay it, or their insurer generally will pay it.
Yeah. Can you? And I know that your company does not sell title policies. Is that right? So,
Right.
but let's talk about that a little bit. How that typically works for people. So, a lot of people may be surprised to hear that effectively that's just an insurance product, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is basically saying you have clear title, and in the event that anybody ever comes back, maybe in a situation like you just said with an IRS lien that wasn't found through a title search, that will ensure that we'll get you clear title or somehow make you
It's a good
whole, or
point.
maybe I'm wrong there. Even go ahead.
Yeah, it's a good point. And again, you want to look at the specifics of the policy. The title policies generally are all pretty much the same. There's 4 major companies in the country that write title, and it's a good product. If you're buying a property, it's almost always a good idea to get title insurance if it's available. You should always get that, but understand the limitations of coverage. First thing is that first 1 or 2 pages. It'll exclude very specific things from coverage, and you should know that as a buyer, as an investor, what's not covered. It also does not require that the insurer has a duty to defend or a duty to make you whole or clear the title. It's a duty to pay you the policy limit. So when you buy the property, let's say you buy it for $322,000, your title policy will be for $322,000. If there's some type of a claim, first thing the title insurer is going to do is look at the policy and say, well, is it excluded? No, it's not excluded. Okay, we'll try to defend this. They'll look to see if there's a way to clear it, if there's a way to fix it, depending on what the nature of the cloud is. If they can't, they just pay you policy limit, $322,000.
Okay.
And that's it. If that claim is still there, well, you have that money, but what if in the meantime the property's appreciated to $500,000
Right.
or $600,000? You got your $322,000, you still have that title issue.
Right.
Their duty is not to clear the title; it's to pay you the policy limit.
Yeah, and similarly, if you, for folks like me, if you're a real estate investor and you buy a house at a distressed price, let's just say it's just a point of example, half the price of the market value, and then you put a bunch of money into it in repairs, you're not insured for that repaired amount. It's just the amount you purchased it for, right?
That's right. And usually for a typical buyer, it takes a long time to get to where it's different. But for an investor, that gap might exist almost immediately.
Yeah, it
You're
could be
exactly
2
right.
weeks, 3 weeks. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly
So
right.
maybe you could, even though, again, you don't sell policies, maybe you could educate us on how that works. So and I'll kind of tell you what I think it is, and then maybe you can correct me because I'm probably missing some
Excellent.
pieces. So
I love
title
that,
companies are typically, they're also almost insurance agents, right? So they write those policies. They're paid a portion of the title policy cost, which is typically the majority of it, like probably 65-70% is typical. And in the event that you have a claim against the title, what is typically the role of that agent? Because I understand that they have some role in helping kind of defend or clear that up.
In my experience as both a customer and a consumer of title insurance, and also working with insurance companies as a provider of services, my experience is that it's the opposite. Once you have a claim, it goes right to the insurer.
Okay.
It could be, Old Republic, Fidelity, First American, the major companies, Chicago Title,
Okay.
and they will handle the claims processing. Now they will check in with the agent because the agent typically wrote the policy and did some of the underwriting. They may have done the search, they may have done a property survey, inspection, background checks on the prior owners to see if there's any judgments. Sometimes the home office actually does all that. The local agent just does the closing.
Okay.
Right? It depends on the company, and also even within the company, certain offices do different things. So typically, the claim goes right to the home office to determine if it's valid, and then also to handle what the move is for them to try to fix that claim.
I see. So I'm sure it's more complicated than this, but kind of the high level chain of events is title research is done, and then once it's done or close to done, then it goes through an underwriting process where the effectively what they typically refer to as like a title plant, I guess, is basically saying we will underwrite this policy or we won't, or we have more questions and these need to be cleared up. Is that right?
There is. And another little side note, if you're an investor and you want to use the title information for some other use, the title information that might be on a title policy may be limited. One of the strategies that title insurers have gone to over the last really decade is to do what's called a thin search. When we do searches for other clients who aren't getting insurance, we do much more extensive searching. The insurers do thinner, cheaper searches because they're insuring over anyways. They just want to catch the big stuff, right? The big chunky stuff. If there's little stuff, they're saving more money on title searches than makes up for that in the long run.
Right.
So instead of spending $150 or $200 for a title search, they might only spend $60 or $70, get a partial limited search, knowing full well that the odds are they might miss a few things over the long run. But that $70 or $80 or $90 they're saving, they can bank that, put that away, so when they do have a claim, they have the money to pay out those claims. So the searches are done on a more limited basis. Some of these searches are actually done overseas in India by outsourced people just doing electronic searches, not even looking at the land records.
Right.
It doesn't matter for you as the insured because you're covered. Right. Even if they miss something, they're going to pay the claim.
Yeah.
But the search information may not be as complete.
Yep. And maybe you could share. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole here, but in terms of how things differ across the country, because I know in some parts of the country there are very different laws and the ways that things were tracked. Like I think Louisiana is a state where there are some old like French laws that make it much more difficult to track, I guess, the history of a property. But maybe you could share a few examples of some parts of the country that are a little more complicated. I'm in Texas, and I think it's probably pretty straightforward here, but maybe I'm wrong. But it's become the normal for me. But maybe talk about some extreme cases around the country.
It's worse than that. It's not even at the state level. It's at the county level. The title records are actually housed and maintained at the county level, and there's 3,611 counties or recording venues nationwide. So when a search is done, we have to actually go into the county courthouses for that county, not even at the state level. So every county is different. Now the state will have statutes that define, how records are kept in that state. But even at the county level, some counties will have microfilm. Some will have books you pull off the shelf. Some will have an index a certain way, and you can go 20 minutes away to another county, completely different.
Yeah.
And it's very complicated to keep track of all those things.
Yeah. And then with title policies, I also understand there are, in Texas where I'm at, if I buy the house and then I sell it a week later and then somebody else buys it and sells it, and if we were to wholesale a house and there's all these title policies, it seems like a bit of a racket because it's a whole new title search, a whole new title policy. So that part aside of whether that's a racket or not, we won't go there. But I know that in some parts of the country, though, they basically will take that title policy and the next person is basically just buying insurance from the time the last policy was pulled. Is that correct?
It could be. Some places, in almost every state you can do this. You can get a reissue credit. So if it's within a certain period of time and you can get a hold of that other policy, you can get a reissue credit because it's not as much of a risk because that other policy took some of the risk. But keep in mind, though, that you understand the difference as an investor between an owner's policy and a lender's policy.
Yeah.
If there's a lender's policy on the property, that means that the lender required title insurance. Let's say you're buying a property and you have a loan through Bank of America. BOA requires you to have a policy. They have a lender's policy, and you might think, well, that's good enough. They're covered. So even though the loan might not be the full value of the property, it's close enough. I don't want to pay any more.
Right.
Well, the problem comes in is if there is a title claim, it goes to that policy. The lender says, hey, this title is no good. There's a cloud on the title. They file a claim with the insurance company. Insurance company pays it. The lender is made whole. But only the lender is made whole. The insurance company now owns that mortgage. They don't clear the property for the owner. So now the mortgage company goes to you as the owner or the borrower and says, well, okay, BOA's off the hook, but now we own the mortgage. So now you pay us.
Right.
But there's a title cloud. It doesn't matter. We own it now.
Yeah.
You didn't buy an owner's policy, so you have no coverage. The coverage only benefits the lender, not the owner.
Okay. I see. Well, and maybe you could share some short words of wisdom for anybody that's out there listening right now that buys and sells properties that doesn't buy a policy or doesn't do proper research.
Yeah, I would highly recommend to
give us the Surgeon General's warning.
Definitely do research. The stuff that we do in investigations and even title searches for government agencies or companies is all due diligence. And these companies, when they're doing a business deal, and it might even be a smaller dollar amount at risk than a property, it might be a $400,000 business deal. They do thousands of dollars in due diligence to make sure that the company they're buying is legit.
Right.
Do the same thing with real estate. You don't have to spend thousands of dollars. You could do the title research yourself. A typical search might be 7 to 10 man hours of research. One thing to do is don't rely on electronic records. Don't try to pull something up on the internet or Google search or any kind of data search unless you can actually see paper documents, see deeds and liens and mortgages and read through them. You're not getting the full info. So even if you do it yourself, that's fine. All the information that we use to create title abstract is all public record. It's in land records. You can pull books off the shelf at the courthouse to get this info, but actually look at the actual legal documents. Don't try to use data. Data isn't enough stuff, and there'll be missing info that will be valuable for you to take risk out of your deal. Because you guys as investors, buying and selling is enough of a roller coaster, right? You have good weeks, bad weeks. You buy a property, you don't buy a property. Don't include title risk into that roller coaster.
Right.
It's not worth it for what it costs, either in time or money. It's relatively inexpensive. You get the highs and lows off doing deals, not off worrying about if there's going to be a $50,000 lien that pops up and takes all the fun out of that deal.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Dave, could you maybe take a couple minutes and tell us about your company and the service you provide, which is title searches largely for real estate investors. But talk about what you do and what you offer to real estate investors.
Yeah, we love dealing with individual, independent investors. That's kind of where the company started when we found that there was a need for title searches outside of that MLS channel. That was mostly that base of market that came from real estate investors, people trying to buy properties at auctions that couldn't get a search anywhere else, and doing that due diligence to take the risk out of the deal. We love helping independent investors to avoid those kind of problems like we talked about, and we also love hearing the success stories. We talked to, I remember a woman who was in her 90s that bought a $20,000 property and flipped it 3 weeks later for in the $40,000 range. And when she called back to get another title search on her second deal, she said, "I'm a granddaughter of a slave. I never made $20,000 a year in my life, and I made it on one deal." So we love hearing those stories and working with investors, small or large. The one thing that we'd like to do more of is help investors get to their first deal. The most important deal for an investor is their first one. It gets you in the game.
Yeah.
It gets it past being a conversation or a dream, and you now dreamt it real. But that first deal is the hardest one because you might have to spend money. And we see it at the front line because sometimes a title search is the first time you actually have to come out of pocket for actual money. You can be on the boards, you can be reading all the different discussion groups, watching Flipner do all this stuff, but until you actually do that first deal, that's what gets you into the game. And we love helping people do that. But we understand it's a leap of faith to do it.
Right. And unfortunately, a lot of new real estate investors, the first time, they tend to not know what they don't know and maybe cut some corners with things like title search and just general insurance on the property. They buy a house, and if it burns down the next day, they're out, and
they're done.
Just some basic stuff. So yeah, that's great. And
even doing inspections, a couple $100 for inspection. I remember talking to an investor that was trying to do a deal, and I don't want to spend $200 for inspection because it's too much money. Well, if you catch a $1,000 furnace that needs to be done, or $10,000 roof, it's a couple $100. And if you're not to that point yet, I don't know if it was emotional coming up with the money or literally don't have the budget. Either way, I wouldn't do the deal unless you're ready to fully commit.
Right.
For those funds and that time and effort.
Yeah. So Dave, if people wanted to maybe look into your company and learn more about getting title searches done where it makes sense, and I know that a lot of investors, they can't, if they don't have a relationship with a title company, they're not intending to buy a title policy per se, or at least not committed to that yet. Most title companies won't just do a title search because they don't really make any money on that. They make money on the whole kind of search and policy together, right?
Yeah, and another area where an investor can use title information either from us or doing it yourself is analysis. We call it moneyballing the deal, where you can look at, when you're looking at comps, making sure that the comps are actual arm's length transaction comps, not just the bank taking back a property and paying full value.
Okay.
Matching up that property's history, maybe going back 30, 40 years in that property's history of value with other properties in the neighborhood to see if it trades higher or lower than the average property, so what the current values are, where that property is going to land.
Right. Great. Well, Dave, if folks want to learn more about you and your company and maybe talk about doing some title searches, where do they go?
Yeah, the best, quickest source is our website, titlesearch.com. Easy to remember. It is what it is. It's titlesearch.com.
Yeah.
We have another one for investigations, which is afxsearch.com. But those are the two to find us. And if you want to find out more about me or other websites, you can just do a Google search for Dave AFX, and you'll find all kind of stuff. We have hundreds of videos for investors on how to do deals, how title goes into deals, how to find the right properties, how to buy right to begin with, because you usually make your profit when you buy it, not when you sell it. And you can find tons of videos. Our YouTube channel is Dave AFX, and there's some other ones, but there's all kind of resources that are free. You don't have to buy anything. You don't have to sign up for any subscription. You can just get all kind of free info.
Great. Well, we'll add some of those links down below the video here. Dave, thanks so much for your time today. Appreciate you sharing some of that information that a lot of us just, it's unfortunately, for most of us, not the sexy side of the business, but it's obviously an important thing to make sure that you've got buttoned up.
Yeah, we're glad to do it. We appreciate being here.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Have a good day. Are you a member of FlipNerd.com, the most robust real estate investing platform in existence, where you can find off-market wholesale deals and great vendors literally in your market? You can get access to advice from experts and learn about local clubs and events right in your backyard. If not, please visit FlipNerd.com and register for a free account. You can register in less than a minute. It's pretty much the coolest site that's ever existed in the real estate investing industry. So get on over to FlipNerd.com.